Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be going over everything you need to know about breeding crested geckos. Now this includes some of the parameters you're going to be needing as far as the crested geckos go before pairing, what you need to kind of know before actually introducing the crested geckos themselves, and then finally just some different techniques there are in the actuality of pairing the animal. With all that being said, I guess it's time to sit back, relax, dive into some crested gecko breeding, and roll the intro. And before we get this video started, I just want to make a little deal with you guys real quick. Now, if you do watch the video all the way through and you find the advice that I say helps you out and helps you in your crested gecko breeding, perhaps you could help me out as well by going down there, hitting that subscribe button, hitting that like button. Sounds like a win-win situation if you ask me. That'd be pretty cool. Let's dive into the video. Now, before you even plan on breeding your crested geckos, there are a few things you need to know and a few things you need to make sure before you do that. Number one and number two are of course going to be the weight of the crested gecko and the age of the animal. Now it seems since I first started breeding crested geckos to now, the opinion on how large your female should be before breeding has gone up pretty significantly. When I first started, it seemed the general consensus was somewhere around that 30 to 35 gram period. Now it seems we've gone only up and up as years gone on, getting to about, I want to say I've heard people even going like 45 to 50 grams for even attempting to breed the female. That was a camera lens that fell, if you heard that. Now, personally for me, I find that 45 to 50 to be a little bit on the more overkill side. I mean, it's definitely good to keep your precautions, you know, be extra safe. If that's the way you want to go to, that's the way you should go to, man. I'm not here to say anything different. Just from personally and myself, I like to keep my females around 35 to 40 grams before trying to breed. Anywhere around there is kind of, I find, the sweet spot when I first start breeding the female. And then moving on to the second topic, of course, we're going to be talking about age. Now, I do believe that age should play a pretty large part when it comes to breeding males and females together, when it comes to crested geckos, when it comes to, I'll just say that 3 times, As far as female crested geckos go, I do believe you want to sit around the 2.5 to 3 year age mark before I would personally feel comfortable breeding the female. I'm not one of those guys that are into like power feeding the animal to get so big to now it's like it's good to go and we can breed it. I find every animal grows at different rates, and so usually around 2.5 to 3 years, even if it's a slow and growing animal, it's going to be an animal that is comfortably a good place to breed. We can actually take one of my grow outs as a great example. This baby was produced in 2019, and so that is now almost 2 years later. We're getting an animal that is somewhere around, I want to say 19 to 21 grams, so nowhere near breeding, yet it does meet what some people call the recommended age of 2 years. This is why it's very important to make sure that you're taking both things into effect, of that being the crested gecko's age, while also you thinking about the crested gecko's weight. Then lastly, I believe there is one more thing you need to take into consideration before even attempting to breed crested geckos, and that's going to be the fact of, how does the animal look overall? When it comes to breeding crested geckos, you want to make sure that you're taking the healthiest animals possible before even attempting breeding. Some common things to look for are the calcium sacs, making sure that this animal has enough calcium to potentially lay all of these eggs without going into any calcium crashing or suffering anything else. Making sure that the animal just is overall healthy, nothing like MBT, MBD, nothing like FTS, things like this. Just making sure you have some nice, healthy, good-looking animals to pair. Alright, now I know I said that was the last thing, but I actually just thought of something more, and that's going to be, should you actually pair these geckos? Now, let's be frank, people. I've said this multiple times. If you guys are been around on the channel for a bit, the crested gecko market is, my god, oversaturated with animals. This is going to make it very difficult to sell if you don't have prime specimens. And not only that, or if you're not really looking for a particular thing, or you don't have a thing in mind, a goal in mind. Personally for me, or here over at DBCB Exotics, when it comes to crested geckos, we are focusing on Super Dalmatians, to get even more specific, Tiger Super Superdels are really my main bread and butter. I really enjoyed the gene. I really love mass producing it, getting some good stuff, getting some awesome babies with a bunch of dots. But even with that, even having my name out here for a few years now, I believe 2 or 3 at least, it's difficult to sell my geckos. I have a hard time selling them, and for someone that's just coming in the game, if you're having something like subpar geckos that really don't look that nice, you're gonna have difficulty, which means you're gonna be holding on to these geckos for a bit. Just a bit of advice before you breed. Now, let's get into it. Alright, now that we talked about a couple of the parameters you need to hit before even breeding crested geckos, let's get into a couple different techniques or ways I found that people breed their crested geckos, including the one I personally do. Now, diving into the first one, I've seen quite a few people just doing things like groups. This can be anywhere from 1.2 to even 1.3, depending on the size of the enclosure. I personally don't do this. I really just as personal opinion, I don't mean to like rag on anyone that does this. I don't really like it, just for a few reasons. One, especially if you're having 2 or 3 females, you don't really know whose eggs are coming from who, unless you're like looking at the animal 24/7 or have some sort of camera equipment in there. I don't really know how they're doing it. Number 3, I don't like cohabbing crested geckos. that's again, personal opinion. I know people are probably gonna scorch me or people are gonna agree with me, whatever, do what you will. Number 3, I don't have too much information on this. I know that some people either just leave them year-round, some people just leave them during breeding season. Either if you're leaving the females together year-round or leaving the group together, the actually breeding trio or breeding quad. What would that be, a breeding quadruple? I don't know. People do it. It's a thing. That's just one way to go. Not my favorite way. Another thing I don't really recommend is leaving breeding pairs together year-round. I don't think it's very wise. There's definitely a couple different things that can go wrong during it. This includes things like calcium crashing from just the animal continuously laying eggs, over-aggression or territorialism, if that's a word, between the male and the female, overbreeding from the male, just straight-up aggression. Sometimes they just get tired. I mean, and, dudes just want to get the deed done. and sometimes the female's like, nah, my guy. And then the fight breaks out. We don't want that. We don't want no tails dropping. We don't want no nips, so I don't really recommend that. But it is a way you can go. However, I think that's the way you should do it. Second to last one is introducing the male and female during breeding season. This is just I know there's a pretty wide timeline. There's a couple different ways people do it. I'll just be going over through that timeline. Now again, some people just leave the male and female during the entirety of breeding season. This would be anywhere from anywhere around just now, so the mid-January to February, all the way through into the fall. While this does produce a pretty good chance of you getting fertile clutches instead of getting some infertile, again, some of those risks that I talked about before can maybe lead to those things, so maybe you don't want to do that, maybe you do. Maybe people have problems, maybe people don't. That's just a thing. The second timeline is the one I personally do, and that's just leaving it for a short period of time. This would be anywhere from a couple of days to a week to a month. I personally opt for somewhere around a week. If I do see that I do get a confirmed lock, like I usually check the bins every day, and when I check them, I see they're locked. I'm usually like, all right, I'll leave it for a day or 2, and then I'll remove them. Check the eggs, see if they're fertile. If they are fertile, good to go. If they're not, I'll repair again for about another week. I'll usually do this 2 or 3 times just to ensure that we have some healthy fertile clutches that are coming from the female throughout the year. And then lastly, there are some people that usually just pair for like 1 day or 2 days. While this gives you the least amount of risk into something going wrong, it also leaves a lot of stuff that can kind of just not happen. If you guys, this might not happen, it might not. Crested geckos, you can't rush them. Maybe the male's a little shy, maybe the female's a little shy. Sometimes it takes more than a day or 2, and yeah, that's a thing. That is a thing. I don't think sometimes they just don't do it fast enough, so that's why I say like a week. That's what I say. That's what my geckos usually say. Yep. And then lastly, before we wrap this video up, let's actually look at what it looks like to pair the animals. Yep, I need to pair some guys, so I figured I'd do a video on it. Pretty much what I do is I'm looking at my male, which is why you see me looking at this. I'm just gonna take my male, put him in my female's enclosure, we'll check it out, do a little montage roll of checking them out, maybe they pair, maybe they don't pair, and then I'll wrap up the video. That'll be the end of it. So let's grab the mail and let's do this. All right, guys, I'm back, and today we are gonna be pairing those crested geckos. So I moved some bins around so it would just be a little bit easier. We got the mail right here. Let's grab him real quick. Oh, he's kind of like, he's entangled in the in this little plant. So here we've got Spots. Spots is my super Dalmatian, if it'll focus in on him. Just really pretty guy. You can see a bunch of spots. We'll see him in a second. And I'm gonna put the camera down to open that bin and we can introduce them. All right, so we got Spots right here who is trying to climb out, and I don't want him to... No, not my arm. God darn it. All right, so we got Spots right there on the left, and then a little bit up down, we've got Cookie, the Super Dalwing Blot Chocolate Super Dalwing Blot, whatever you want to call it. Well, this is about it. This is pretty much all I do, is just, they're here, and I wait, probably come back in a couple of hours, see how they're doing. Very rarely, once I like immediately introduce them, they'll immediately get to it. Usually takes like a couple of hours at the very least, so I'll come back, check on them, see what's going on, and that is about it. Pretty easy stuff. Just put them in and let them get to work. There you have it, guys. A little bit of tips and trips on how to breed crested geckos with a little demonstration I just did with my personal crested geckos. That's about it. If I miss anything or you guys got any questions, make sure to leave them down there in the comments and I will answer them. And I guess this is the part where I do my outro. As always, huge shout out to Zen Habitats. If you're unfamiliar with Zen Habitats, they make enclosures like this one. Wow, that is a pretty rad enclosure. If you're looking for an awesome enclosure that your crested geckos would love, I highly recommend their 2 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot. It's like a crested gecko mansion, man. That'd be pretty rad. That'd be pretty rad for your geckos, and it's rad to look at. It's a win-win situation. Information's down there in the description with the link Zen Habitats if you want to check that out. And other than that, you guys know the spiel by now. I got the Facebook, I got the Instagram. Make sure to follow me over there. We got some merch. Hey, buy some merch. That'd be cool. It's down there in the description, where there's also patreon.com/dbcbexotics. Yes, Patreon, where you get the behind the scenes of the business of DBCB Exotics. You get the first look at everything that's been going on here, including gecko stuff, gecko eggs, gecko babies, monitor eggs, monitor babies. There's a whole thing, man. There's a bunch of stuff going on here. You don't want to miss it. You get the first look if you're Patreon. It's $1 a month starting out. Good deal, good stuff. Which makes also a good outro because you're in it. If you're on Patreon, you're in the outro. That was a bad segue for the outro, but we're still gonna roll it anyway. Let's roll it.